everybody, and welcome to another brand new episode of T Watches a Scary Movie. My name is T, and of course, we're talking scary movies. I appreciate you tuning in for another brand new episode. Remember, new episodes go up every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on the YouTube page. That's youtube.com/C/Theron Scary Movie. Again, youtube.com/C/Theron Scary Movie. And you can also check out the audio versions on your favorite podcasting platforms just by searching T Scary Movie or TWASM or T Watches a Scary Movie, whatever you got to find the show there. So, what are we talking about tonight? Tonight, we are talking about episode 7 of season 2 of Chucky, Going to the Chapel. We're talking about this on the eve of the final episode of season 2 going up. Oh man, this has been such a good season. I'm sad that we're already at the end of it. The fact that we only get 2 months of Chucky is so sad. But I do point out that one thing that we did notice that that we're talking about as well too is that I swear to God I heard at the end of Going to the Chapel the fall finale, which to me implies that there are more episodes of Chucky coming possibly in the spring. But I don't know, because it's been a good tradition now in the last couple of years that Chucky debuts every October. So every Halloween season, we got a new season of Chucky starting. But if this is true, if I did hear that correctly, and this is only a fall finale, and we're getting more episodes in the spring, does that mean Chucky keeps up with the fall debut, or does that mean we might not be getting a new season of Chucky until 2024? Don't know. But either way, excited to talk about that. And because we're right before Thanksgiving as well too. I don't know why I link vampires with Thanksgiving, but we're gonna actually talk about a movie that I've been putting off for quite a while at this point. I added it to the schedule earlier this year, and then when we started just getting more and more new stuff, I kept pushing it back further and further. So we're gonna be talking not Near Dark. I'm sorry, I say Near Dark. A film inspired by Near Dark, The Forsaken. And some of you might already be sad about that, because it's like, man, Near Dark is such a good movie. But we're going to be talking The Forsaken, a vampire film that was inspired by Near Dark that I'm very, very excited to talk with y'all, to discuss with y'all tonight here. So we're going to get to that for sure. But let's go ahead and jump into it. We are talking episode 7, season 2 of Chucky, Going to the Chapel. So, if you remember, episode 6 left us off in a very nefarious spot to where Nadine had recently been killed by the good Chucky, whose programming to good Chucky seems to be wearing off. It doesn't seem to be lasting as much as the Colonel, Dr. Mixter, showed up at the Catholic school. They promptly made sure to go and murder Hulk Chucky by poisoning the communion wafers with arsenic, and then they went on to go and kill Jake, Devin, Lexi, pretty much everybody who was witness to everything that's going on with Chucky. But Andy actually turned the tables, and Andy was able to kill the Colonel pretty much like that. But it still left Dr. Mixter in control. Dr. Mixter was looking to take the remaining Chucky doll, Good Chucky, which, as we're apparently led to believe right now, is the only Chucky doll that's left right now, so she can use the Good Chucky's body to transfer Chucky Prime out of Nika back into the Chucky doll that Good Chucky inhabits, because dolls are just a little bit more sturdy. They're a little bit better to carry Chucky's soul than a human being clearly is. So a deal has been struck at this point that in order to transfer Chucky Prime out of Nika's body into the body of Good Chucky, they're going to do an exorcism. Basically, Nika gets to be Nika at this point, and Chucky leaves Nika's body to inhabit the last remaining, as we think, Chucky doll. Now, there's all these problems that our group has to think about as well, too. If you think about it, Lexi has probably been suffering the most, I would say, out of everybody this season. I know a lot of times we look at Jake because Jake lost his foster brother Gary and he feels responsible for that. Jake lost pretty much all of his family in season 1, so he has no living family at this point. But Lexi has definitely been taking the events of season 1 and everything that's been happening in season 2 really, really hard. As we know, she's been taking drugs to cope at this point, and even Nadine, who she swore she wouldn't be a friend to, she actually got really, really close to Nadine. And so getting over her drug addiction, which has been a running thing this season, and dealing with everything to do with Chucky and Devin's compelling nature to help out good Chucky has kind of been sending her spiraling. And the death of Nadine was enough to really push her over the edge. So she ends up trying to overdose on the drugs that she ends up tracking down. But she hallucinates and sees Nadine's ghost, who convinces her to keep on going, which is fun because I was sad that we lost Nadine so quickly here. Bella Higginbotham, who plays Nadine, has been so good in the role, coming off of the Mighty Ducks, which I hope she ends up coming back to the show in season 3, because season 2 has been so much fun, and they've only taken some of the core group of kids from that if you're a Mighty Ducks fan. So I'm hoping that Nadine returns in season 3 here. But the fact that Nadine got to show up at least for one more time to convince Lexi to not kill herself at this point, that was a welcome addition here for it. Now, things are progressing even further here with the group of, or not with the group, but with Glinda and Glenn and Chucky. Because over the course of this season, as we've been introduced to Glinda and Glenn, we definitely know that the two of them don't feel whole. You know, we know that it's not necessarily a split personality, and I definitely want to make sure I'm being careful about the wording that I'm using here, because in Seed of Chucky, you know, we got introduced to Glenn and Glinda, and they're two entirely separate personalities. And I don't want to say it's necessarily a split personality, because the end of that movie took those two personalities and Tiffany put them into two children's bodies. So you had Glenn and you had Glinda. And at the time, Glenn was presented as, you know, as male, and Glinda was presented as female. And as we've seen now over the show, they're non-binary. Both of them are non-binary. So it's very interesting, because they're two separate people, but they're also one person as well, too. And what it seems, to me at least, that we're kind of leading towards is that Glenn and Glinda need to kind of be rejoined together. That they're both two parts of one soul, and you can't really have one without the other. Like, think of it kind of like Hellraiser, you know, when Pinhead or the Hell Priest, whatever you're going to call them, in the Hellraiser movies, you know, got separated from the soldier that became the Hell Priest. It didn't really work separately. They had to go back together in order to truly stop the Hell Priest from what they were doing. And I wonder if that's kind of what we're looking at here with Glenn and Glinda as well, too. That the two of them being separated and not being whole is effectively killing them spiritually and mentally. And that we're leading to the idea that the two of them have to be rejoined in order for both of them to survive. I don't know. But we'll definitely see where that's going. We got one episode left, so I'm very intrigued to see where they go with that. But Jake, Devin, Lexi, Father Bryce, Dr. Mixter, Nika, Kyle, they're all there to basically put this exorcism in order. The idea is that they're going to banish good Chucky's soul to hell. They're going to exorcise good Chucky's soul to hell, which basically frees the doll and allows Nika to transfer Chucky Prime's soul into good Chucky's body. Now, we knew that this alliance was going to be temporarily lived, because earlier in the season, when we found out that Good Chucky and Nika are kind of working together, it was only a alliance of convenience. Obviously, Chucky Prime, I said Good Chucky, but Chucky Prime isn't here to do anything good at this point, and is just looking to get back and get his revenge. So obviously, there was going to be some repercussions that were coming out of this, and we definitely got to see some repercussions here from this. Because we definitely found out here that not everybody is who they were saying they actually were at the end of the day, as Father Bryce took confession from everybody. But Father Bryce, not understanding that there is life or death at play here, chooses not to reveal all the secrets from these confessions that he's gathering, which unfortunately will never be shared at this point, because when the exorcism was completed, good Chucky soul was sent over to Father Bryce, and then in an awesome, gory fashion, Father Bryce exploded. Father Bryce, played by Devon Sawa, absolutely just destroyed, and we got our tradition at this point of another Devon Sawa character biting the dust hardcore. And I'm gonna say it again, Don Mancini, please don't stop bringing Devon Sawa back, because this has been fantastic. I love the fact that we keep getting new characters that Devon Sawa is playing, and they keep getting dispatched in gruesome ways. You have to keep it going for season 3. Let's get Devon Sawa back in again as a completely different character who ends up getting killed one more time by Chucky. And I think maybe season 3 might be the last time we'll get that gag. I hope not. But I hope we can get Devon Sawa back as many times as humanly possible in this. And the episode left us off in a very interesting place, because good Chucky soul was sent to Father Bryce. Father Bryce exploded at that point, and then Chucky Prime soul was placed into the body of good Chucky, the last remaining Chucky doll. And as Dr. Mixter tried to escape with now Chucky Prime, was thwarted by Andy, who managed to kill what we think was Chucky Prime as Dr. Mixter got away. And that gave us a truly heartwarming look at the lives of Kyle and Andy, because you have to think about this, the fact that Andy's life has been Chucky since 1987. And, you know, finally, over 30 years later, this nightmare might actually end. And we got a nice callback to Child's Play 2, showing Kyle and Andy walking away from the factory. And at that time, you know, that was the last time that that Andy really got to talk with Kyle, at least at that point, because then that was it for Alex Vincent playing the role until, you know, Curse of Chucky, and they brought him back to it. And it's just very interesting to see this, because it did seem like it was a send-off for Christine Elise McCarthy and Alex Vincent, which I hope not, because those two are absolutely fantastic. But I also understand that they might be done with these characters. Don Mancini might be done with these characters in this world as well too. But I don't know about that, because two things were left off here. Dr. Mixter escaped, but Dr. Mixter seems like she is now inhabiting Chucky Prime. Don't know for sure, but it does seem like Dr. Mixter has taken on Chucky Prime at this point. And so that seems like that might be where we're going. I don't know if that's what we're getting in this last episode, at least for now, but I don't think that Chucky is obviously gone at this point. And then a step further, Nika, who is now free of Chucky apparently, Nika wanted to take out Tiffany, because the thing is that Tiffany is still absolutely terrible. Let's not forget that Tiffany is a murderer, and Tiffany has put Nika through so much as well too, including cutting off Nika's arms and legs, which is absolutely terrible for Nika. But when Glenn has asked, like, you know, they don't want Tiffany to die. Glenn and Glenda want their mom. They need somebody at this point. Nika decided against that and attempted to shoot Tiffany in the body of Jennifer Tilly. And one thing that we got to see in this episode is that now Tiffany does not have the option of going back to the Tiffany doll that was inhabited by Jennifer Tilly, as Jennifer Tilly chose to took her own life by escaping from the car that contained Glenn and Tiffany and just jumping out in front of a semi-truck, destroying that doll. And when Nika chooses to shoot Tiffany, Glenn jumps in front of Tiffany and takes the bullet instead. Now, I don't think we have to guess where this is going, that Glenn's body is probably not long for this world, and what this is likely going to end is that Glenn is going to end up back in the body of Glinda, the doll body from Seed of Chucky, which Tiffany did show them is that she has possession of. So I don't know where we're going with it, but I think it's reasonable to believe that the next season might focus a little bit more on Tiffany and Glenn and Glinda at being as being like these are big bads for season 3. I'm thinking that's where we're going. Maybe Chucky takes a season off, which would be interesting because the show is centered around Chucky for sure. But do we lose anything from Chucky not being our main character in it? I don't know. I'm very interested to see where we can go. There's a lot of interesting things that are coming up from episode 7. And episode 8 seems to be a Christmas episode. So I don't know if we're going to tidy everything up super nicely. This seems to focus more on the kids, getting back with Lexi's mom. I'm just very interested to see where this could end up going. And I don't think everything's going to be tidied up in this one episode. I think we might get to see Chucky Prime as Dr. Mixter coming and trying to extract revenge. I don't know if we're going to see Tiffany and Glenn and Glinda show back up at this point. I think we're going to have a lot of questions as this season ends to bring us into season 3. I don't know, but I'm very interested to see where it goes. Tune in. You're probably watching this as you're watching the season finale right now, or the fall season finale. And hopefully we'll know if we're getting a spring season here. But I'm very interested to see where we're going with it, folks. And that leads us to our movie review tonight. We are talking The Forsaken. So I had seen this movie a long time back, and I wasn't a huge fan of it at the time. The Forsaken was written and directed by J.S. Cardone, who you might know has written on quite a number of remakes you might be aware of, including The Stepfather and Prom Night. Yeah, he wrote both. He helped to write both of those films. Prom Night, a favorite of mine. Big fan of that remake. I'm actually a big fan of, honestly, the Stepfather remake as well too. I understand they're not considered to be as great as the originals, obviously, but I'm actually a big fan of both of those movies. And if anything, he actually was a producer of the third vampire movie as well too, and like the John Carpenter series, which I've never seen. I don't think it has any connections at all to the first or even the second film. But The Forsaken tells the story of Sean, who is working as a freelance driver, taking a car from Los Angeles all the way to Miami, which will also allow him to attend the wedding of his sister. But along the way, he picks up hitchhiker Nick, who happens to be a vampire hunter who is hunting the Forsaken, the first vampires that have infected quite a number of people. And this movie chooses the 2000s route that we went with a lot of vampire films, to where they weren't really focusing on like the romantic nature and like the lore of vampires. Things like garlic, things like crosses, things like the counting of things, like all these like old tropes, vampires turning into bats and wolves and things like that. A lot of our 2000s era's vampire movies really got away from that. And I thought that was an interesting shift because those movies weren't really, I guess, resonating too much with a lot of people who are watching vampire movies at the time. Instead, a lot of vampire movies in the 2000s and on chose to approach vampires from a virus kind of thing. And it's funny enough, I think that's something that John Carpenter's Vampires really did focus on, and a movie that inspired The Forsaken, Near Dark, to where they didn't really focus too much on a lot of those romantic tropes. They focused on vampirism as being this virus. Basically, it's passed down, and there's only certain ways that you can get rid of it. If you remember in Near Dark, they did blood transfusions, and those blood transfusions was the way of curing a couple of the vampires in that story. And across a lot of vampire movies in the 2000s, they focused more so on the fact that it was the disease. It was kind of like an STD, basically, that once you got it, it was really hard to get rid of. In some movies, you had the ability to get rid of it, but in other movies, it's there for life at that point. And that's kind of the way that The Forsaken takes it. And it's not this big grand movie where vampires are romantic and they're rich and they're doing all these things. We see that the vampires still have a familiar that has to basically drive them around in the daylight and take care of them, played by Simon Rex. We see that these vampires, they're not really so much about the vampire fangs or anything like that. Like, that's actually not really a big focus in this movie at all, that they have fangs. Just more so they need this blood to survive. There is a backstory that they get into with the Forsaken as well. But the whole idea here is that if any of these vampires bite you, you have to kill that bloodline. Like, you have to kill that Forsaken that was responsible for whoever bit you. And if you do, everybody gets turned back. And that's really the plight here of Nick. Nick himself has been infected by the disease and has introduced these drugs that him and others can take to kind of hold the disease off. But over time, it's going to lose its effectiveness. So Nick is just traversing the country trying to find these vampires so he can turn himself back. And it's interesting because I really do enjoy the concept of it, that Nick just isn't this, he's not like Jack Crow in Vampires Inc., to where they have all these weapons and they know all these things to help them combat the vampires. He's just this guy who unfortunately got bit at some point, and he's just trying to survive as long as he can. He's learned a few tricks. He's learned a little bit of the backstory about these vampires, but he's not this all-knowing guy who just has the answers to everything. And that's a common thread that gets picked up between him and Sean, played by Kerr Smith. And it's interesting, too, looking at the cast. Kerr Smith, Brendan Fehr, Isabella Miko, Jonathan Sach. These are all like the it actors at the time. Kerr Smith was coming off of like Felicity, or not Felicity, I'm sorry, Dawson's Creek. Brendan Fehr was coming off of Roswell. Isabella Miko, Coyote Ugly. Jonathan Sach, that thing you do, and a few other things as well. And it's very much a 2000s movie. And man, rewatching it again got me all nostalgic for like the music that was going through it, the look of the actors themselves, because these days those aren't the looks of actors that you get. Like, it's very much, the shaved heads, or like the spiky hair. Like, it's such a fun look at our protagonists, even the villains in this movie as well. And it's a very bloody film for sure, honestly, which is interesting for a 2000s film, because while we were big on gore in the 2000s, I think we were big on extravagant gore, stuff that didn't look real at all. And this is a very bloody movie for sure. And again, it's very different from the typical vampire movies that we get as well, too. There's not a lot of victims in this film, which is interesting, again, for a vampire movie, because you think we'd focus on that a bit more. Almost to the point to where I think they are very much expecting they would get a sequel out of this. And the film is left in a way that really builds to getting one, to the point to where, man, I wish actually this is something that somebody would revive. Because the movie was released in April of 2001. We're over 20 years away from this point. And what's to say that Sean and Nick still aren't out there looking for more of the Forsaken at this point? I could absolutely deal with a sequel with it. Now, that being said, it's not really highly regarded, and I think that's probably because there's not a lot of victims in it. We don't get to see these vampires being vampires too much. It's not that long of a movie. It's only 90 minutes long, so it's a bit short in the tooth, honestly. And I know you're thinking 90 minutes is an average time, but when we spend a lot of that time getting introduced to Sean, getting some introduction to Nick, they bring Megan in, played by Isabella Miko, and Megan herself isn't really that much of a character until the last 15-20 minutes of the film, which honestly hurts that character. We just don't spend a lot of time with these characters enough to where we really get that much of a connection to them, and that's a downer, because I think that if we had another 30 minutes to it, we could actually get a bigger investment into it. It's a bit too short to really connect with a lot of these characters in it. The action in it isn't extravagant by any means. There's a lot of car chase scenes in it, which are very reminiscent also of like The Hitcher as well, which is interesting because that's the whole purpose of the story, is that Sean picks up Nick, who is a hitchhiker. But there are very reminiscent themes here of The Hitcher for sure that I was picking up in it, and that's not a bad thing in the least bit at all, because I'm a big fan of The Hitcher. But this doesn't really live up to other films like Near Dark and like The Hitcher that had better themes and resonated better with the audiences that were watching with it. It's absolutely not a bad film in my opinion, but it's not one that I think a lot of you are going to go back and revisit. If you're looking for a good nostalgia trip and seeing how horror was in the early 2000s, I can definitely recommend it for sure. But past that, I don't know how many of y'all are actually going to be dying to go back and check this out. Great soundtrack, cool concept that might have been executed a little bit better in another film at this point. Either way, if you get a chance, check out The Forsaken. Hey everybody, I appreciate you checking out this video, whether it was a review, whether it was a new episode, whether it was an unboxing, an interview, or whatever else. I want to remind you, you can check out my separate reviews also on my YouTube page, and new full episodes go up every Wednesday night on YouTube at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and on your favorite podcasting platforms at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like and share. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.